Right, we should now be live again. Excellent. So, good evening, everyone. I am the Bad-Tempered Badger, and I'm once again here with... That'll be you.
Yes, once again, Director Arketer of Arketer Labs. Or, well, I don't think the audiences tend to overlap terribly, but if anyone has seen an Arcturus on Magog and Warscar's side quest, that's also me, but try to keep it under your hats. Don't want to ruin the illusion for too many people.
Outstanding. Now, we are once again, I've just sent you the link, we are once again discussing SCP-related things as well as some other things that I'm sure we'll move on to as we go on. So, while you're doing that, I will just introduce the topic. The SCP Foundation is, of course, a very secretive organization dealing with the discovery and containment of anomalous artifacts, entities, and other creations. So, the Foundation deals with a great many dangerous things, but also some relatively benign and quite interesting, and in some cases quite amusing things. One good example that's in my mind of the more amusing side of the Foundation would be the what was it called again? The Butler's Handbell, which I think is a rather fine SCP indeed.
It is, and it's a fascinating one. I also have been wondering for the longest time, what do they plan to do when the bell finally decays past usability? But what person who would like to have a butler wouldn't like to have Mr. Deeds?
Indeed. Well, I think Mr. Deeds is definitely a very fine butler, and also I think that the handbell may continue to function after it begins to lose its structural integrity. As I understand, it doesn't actually have a ringer as it is now, but the ring still continues without that. The ringing, rather.
Yes, but it's sure to continue degrading over time. I don't know, maybe... I suppose what they need to be looking into is, can it be repaired? Then again,
that's a very good question.
I don't know. But the important thing about Mr. Deeds, I suppose, is that you have to remember he's only as unethical as you are.
Indeed, and there are certain things that he won't do.
Indeed. But he'll still do just a metric crap ton of things.
What was one of the things he wouldn't do? He wouldn't acquire a Fabergé egg. He was either unwilling or unable to acquire such a thing. I wonder why that could be. I'm not sure if that would be due to an inability to acquire such an object, or whether it would be due to a dislike for them. Although he doesn't seem to have refused anything else due to a dislike for it.
It would seem to be rather unusual for him to just object on the grounds of personal displeasure.
Indeed. He doesn't seem to have done that in any other instance that has been recorded by the Foundation.
Quite. I'm a bit fuzzy on the precise details, so you feel free to correct me if I get things wrong, but what I always find fascinating is how he could quite possibly explain, as mentioned previously, the mysterious fate of Lord Blackwood.
He could indeed. Well, for regular visitors to my channel, they may have noticed that I do have a certain affinity for Lord Blackwood. In fact, there is one tale of Lord Blackwood currently available, and hopefully soon to be a second once I actually make it.
No, it's excellent work. I did watch for a bit of it.
Oh, thank you very much, my fine fellow. So, moving on from the handbell to Lord Blackwood himself. He does seem to be a very interesting individual. However, there is some debate as to whether his current form is in fact him or something that believes itself to be him.
Well, I remember seeing a bit of unofficial documentation regarding an interview with Mr. Deeds that involved him having a dream that his employer had become a slug at one point. This is what led to the theory that hypothetically it could be that Mr. Deeds is just one of those peculiar souls who has tremendous reality warping abilities that manifested late in life, resulting in turning Mr. Blackwood into his present state and simultaneously turning him into what he wanted to be, the perfect butler, or at least his idea of being the perfect butler.
Well, he is certainly a very good butler. Although I do recall a marked inability at barbering. He did seem to struggle with the procedure of cutting one of the doctor's hair.
Well, I can believe that. I suspect that his reality bending powers probably came into effect well after he gave up on becoming a decent barber. And being a decent barber may not, to Mr. Deeds, seem to be part of being a perfect butler. That's why you have a barber.
A butler and a barber are not necessarily interchangeable or the same thing. And of course, in the particular time period that Mr. Deeds is thought to be from, a barber would also be a surgeon. So that
has anyone tested Mr. Deeds' surgical capabilities?
I don't believe anyone has. I'm not actually sure about that. Although he did, there was that one time when he performed surgery on himself. But the object of that was to render himself dead for examination. So the idea of performing surgery with the subject remain living after hasn't been tested.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't suggest they try with anyone who's not D-class. It seems like a sure way to result in further explorations.
Indeed. So, moving on a little, what would you say, are there any particular SCPs that particularly take your interest?
Oh, there are a legion of them. It's really hard for me to pick favorites. I have ones, of course, that I hate the most. I do feel that, look, it should be possible to kill the Terrasquay. I don't think they're really trying, but then I also understand why, because the Terrasquay is immortal through no function of its physical form. If you took the Terrasquay, launched it, put it into a rocket, and shot into the sun, it would just, come crashing back to Earth, but now with the power of the burning sun.
Yes, that is a bit of an issue.
That said, I keep thinking there are ways they could improve containment they haven't tried yet, as far as I'm aware. Like, for instance, if I'm not correct, they're still keeping it soaked in acid, right?
That was the last I heard.
Okay. I want to know why they aren't using an inert or a coated inert metal bar and running it through the corpse of Terrasquay. Just turn its containment unit into an acid bath / Iron Maiden. If for any reason you can't keep the acid flow going, it's surely got to take some time to get those bars out.
You would think so. I mean, it would have to presumably reform itself in a different shape that could maneuver around these bars and it would have to take some time to do that while the acid was being repumped in or whatever. So that might give the Foundation personnel time to re-establish containment.
Oh, well, my estimation would take much longer for Terrasquay to get loose in that context, but these are not the calls I get to make. Look, the Foundation leadership doesn't listen to me. They never have, they never will, and that's to be expected. Really, I'm just glad they leave me alone for the most part.
Well, as I'm sure you've noticed from the video feed, I am much more likely to be considered an anomalous entity than to be active in containing them. So I don't believe they've assigned me a number, but I'm sure one of them may come knocking at some point.
Oh, yes. Well, you just have to try your best. I suppose you wouldn't be the only SCP qualifying individual or entity that is not in containment. There are entire organizations that are dabbling in SCP materials that haven't been brought to heel. As far as I'm aware, isn't Marshall, Carter, and Dark still in operation?
I believe they are. From the last I heard, they are still carrying on with their various nefarious activities of buying, selling, and trading anomalous entities and artifacts.
And I've often wondered what exactly is the profit margin in that when half the SCP is going out there can completely ruin an economic system, say, by, I don't know, manufacturing gold out of damn near anything?
Mm-hmm. Or there is that one particular one, which is I think it was called a lucky penny, but I would personally call it an unlucky penny, where anything that the holder of the penny touches becomes pennies.
Yeah, so the crappiest of Midas touch type curses.
Well,
Well, not the crappiest. I mean, it could be worse. It could turn things into actual crap. That probably is an SCP somewhere.
It converted, I think, not the mass, but the volume of the thing into the same volume of pennies. So I think it was found by some homeless chaps, and one of them accidentally converted one of their friends into pennies.
No, not surprised. That said, if they could refrain from screwing up on this fashion, there's a tremendous profit margin there. I mean, the pennies still have some value, not just as currency, and I'm pretty sure they'll count as counterfeit, unless it's actually drawing pennies from some national reserve somewhere. You could still do an awful lot with a bunch of things converted suddenly into an amount of pennies, especially if it's converting by volume and not mass.
You could convert something that was rather, mass light but volume large into a large collection of pennies, and then use the then created pennies as a source of metal, effectively.
You could, yes. I'm not sure it's the best thing to build with, but I'm sure you can get in touch with a supplier that would like a cheap resale option. I'm sure deals could be made to turn that one around.
Absolutely. Well, something that's always interested me about Marshall, Carter, and Dark is where they get their anomalous artifacts, because I understand that some of them will be ones that have just been found or acquired, in some cases, from the Foundation themselves. But other ones, I believe they are in contact with people who specifically are capable of making new anomalous artifacts that they can then sell. I believe they probably have people on staff to do that.
Oh, well, by my last count, the Foundation has just a massive problem with SCP creators. I mean, we all are surely familiar with, are we cool yet?
I have heard of them, yes.
Yes. According to them, another group that somehow persists, despite the fact that they seem to be almost entirely nothing but smug hipsters, who have their own social cliques and soirees and cool kids clubs where only the best and most thought-provoking SCP creators can possibly join in.
Of course, yes.
Somehow have outthought and dodged around the entire Foundation for a ridiculous amount of time.
Well, there was that one chap who created the Nerf gun that nerfs whatever you shoot with it. So it will reduce whatever it is shot with the one specific dart that comes with the gun to the same thing but of lower quality.
I
That was rather
get it.
one.
I get it. It's a meta Nerf gun.
Yes.
Nerf gun that nerfs things.
I think the Foundation interviewed the chap who made it, and he was the chap was most distressed that they tested it with shooting a human.
Well,
because, of course, they did. That's what the Foundation does.
Look, there's actually a Foundation ethics committee I learned some time ago, and it is just the saddest group of people imaginable.
Ethics committee.
Look, it's not so much an ethics committee as it is a close-knit group of people within the Foundation who just watch everything going horribly wrong in the Foundation and commiserate with each other about it.
Now, that was rather unethical, wasn't it?
There's a lot of just completely indefensible crap that the Foundation has done over the years. Like, I remember making a recording of covering, what was it? Leviathan.
Interesting.
And apparently, this was in the bad old days of the Foundation, but apparently, because a battleship had some sailors who saw some rocks that they thought just looked a bit like scales, they sank the entire ship and killed everyone on board. What the hell was the Foundation thinking back then? That raises so many more questions than some sailors getting home and saying, "Hey, honey, you wouldn't believe it. I saw these rocks and they looked like scales." No one cares. People do care when their loved ones inexplicably die at sea.
Indeed. They start to care when suddenly people have gone missing.
Yes, and not to mention that they had no doubt had to do some really swift explaining with the U.S. Navy. I mean, I'm pretty sure they're not too happy about losing an entire battleship.
No, it's much easier to explain I saw something weird out at sea than everyone on the ship is now dead.
Yeah, so like, look, okay, you saw some rocks that looked like scales. Well, look, the sailors themselves even assumed it was a rock. That's a situation
That's
where
a
you observe.
Containment situation.
I really don't know what the Foundation was thinking back then, and I still give them grief about that.
Indeed. So, while we're discussing your personal sort of involvement with the Foundation and your own research, are there any research things that you're currently engaged with?
Well, Arketer Labs is always not so much in regards to things that apply to the SCP Foundation. Nothing paranormal. Strictly conventional super science. No psychics, no ghosts, no cursed objects. We just have the one item, but that's, well, I would have classed it Euclid, but it's safe enough.
I see.
A Hollowed Prophet. It's a long story. Suffice to say, it's this mannequin featuring a rather ragged cloak and has a mask that looks a bit like I believe it's the North American jackdaw. It's strange, but every so often it pops up in a random place and utters a prophecy like, "You will die in up to 96 years surrounded by loved ones." Which, if a person is particularly suggestible, they'll take it seriously and start freaking about them depending on mortality. Kind of missing the point that, well, of course you're going to be dead within 96 years or less. In that context, the good news is that you're not going to die alone, according to Hollowed Prophet.
That could apply to almost anyone.
It's a tremendous waste of time, is what it is.
Well, my own personal anomalous encounters at the moment are, I'm mostly non-anomalous, although my burrow does seem to be haunted at the moment. I'm not entirely sure how this happened, but I do have a certain demon or something resembling a demon that seems to visit from time to time.
I see. Acute sympathies. We are spectre-free here. There was one time, I believe it was last Halloween, where Steam was asking the dead some questions. We conjured up a spook. Apparently wasn't of this reality exactly. it didn't end well. It kind of broke containment and registered some displeasure with the efforts to question it. But it was sent back shortly thereafter. No big deal. Still, so I say I can feel your pain, especially if, oh, I don't know, this thing might have possessed you at some point and prompted you to injure yourself in some capacity.
Well, not exactly injure, although I did receive what I would. I did receive what I would call bite marks.
Okay.
If you know what I mean. Now,
well,
the other...
I thought I knew what you mean, but now that you said, do I know what you mean? It's suggestive now.
Well, I didn't want to hint at anything, you see. So, that was what I was going to bring up. When you mentioned that your, how would you call it, spiritual encounter was from another reality.
Well, look, it was some sort of held mention. All I know is that it was incredibly unpleasant company, couldn't give a straight answer to anything, and kept on babbling about floating in a sea of damned souls, so... Yeah, it didn't really reflect anything that we are familiar with.
I see.
Was it?
I was concerned, you see, whether there was a whether you might have had an encounter with the unwilling dimension hopper.
No, I don't think so. This was a fairly standard. Let's see, how would the Ghostbusters have classified it? Some manner of floating vapor, I'm pretty sure. It had vaguely humanoid form, no legs, and sounded a bit like it had been dropped down a well. There's about 3 or so other voices.
I see.
Really an unpleasant little bastard.
Yeah, I can imagine so. But yeah, the unwilling dimension hopper is one of the ones I find more interesting, because that particular SCP has the potential to encounter many others just by virtue of its specific anomalous properties, as in hopping between various different dimensions.
No, quite likely. What surprises me is how many... I would like to know how many of these SCPs have not found their way into Foundation custody and have been promptly destroyed henceforth. Something that is capable of dying or being destroyed, that just randomly hops between dimensions, seems guaranteed to eventually pop into a dimension that results in its immediate destruction.
Or pop into a location, or even upon its return, just popping up under the sea or something like that.
Yep. Active volcano, edge of a rather brittle cliff, any number of things that, unless it's pretty much indestructible otherwise, should result in its, well, termination.
Indeed. Unless, of course, there is some outside force kind of directing the dimension hops to cause the subject to appear in locations that are safe for it to appear.
Possibly. That can't be put beyond consideration. Then again, very little can with SCPs. This is another point of grief I've had with the Foundation for some time, and I hope that this is just a function of the gratuitous amounts of misinformation they put out. But their classification habits are really sloppy. There are a lot of things that really shouldn't be labeled safe and then given free reign of a facility. That's just reckless. And yes, I do mean the iPods, too. I know they're adorable, but they don't have brakes. If you want to, keep them near 173, was it? The murderous statue, just as a safety precaution, that's one thing. But letting him run loose the facility wholesale? What a terrible idea.
Yeah, it does seem a little less than sensible, doesn't it? But I think that the Foundation's classifications...
Wait, hold on. Mr. Freya said that they think Arketer is better than a dryer full of wombats. No. No, I know it looks that way. I look like a classic mad scientist. I am not mad. I'm increasingly irritated, yes, but not mad. I've managed to keep fairly calm in context. Anyone who's been paying attention to the world as a whole should be able to sympathize.
No, I do agree. I generally try to keep to an air of what's a good explanation of it? I suppose an air of eccentricity.
I couldn't possibly relate.
So, I believe the Foundation's classifications are based on ease of containment, or they're supposed to be based on ease of containment anyway.
See, that's not the rules I understood, unless things have changed, which is entirely possible. Or again, they're just making crap up as they go. Also very probable. But suffice to say, I understood safe to mean you put it in a box, you close the box, and you never have to mess with it again. You put it on the shelf and it stays there and you don't have to worry about it. Now, if you used it, it could pull your eyeballs out through your rectum, or it could give you a haircut, or it could warp you into the 35th dimension. But so long as you don't screw with the damn thing, it does nothing. Now that is safe as I understand it, unless of course it was capable of ending the world.
Yes.
Euclid made a lot more sense to me as not being safe, because Euclid means something that is animate, that is pursuing its own agenda, whether it's understood or not. That makes sense. And of course, we're all familiar with Keter, which means usually a huge threat to the world as a whole and should probably be destroyed, but probably won't be for sorted reasons.
And then they came up with another one for useful anomalous artifacts or entities, didn't they?
Oh, like, well, that might be news to me. I
only discovered this quite recently. I think they came up with something starting with a TH, and it was for it was the classification of the very large eel-like creature that a lot of the Foundation's amnestics come from. Let me look it up.
Well, I approve of the classification because there are a lot of SCPs that are useful and they probably should make use of, although I would say primarily the safe ones that don't give any indication whatsoever of having their own goals and aspirations.
Yeah, it is best if, if you're trying to classify something as safe, it's best if that thing is not able to think for itself and plot against you without your knowledge.
Yes, as it is. Well, that's the other thing that keeps me awake at night regarding the Foundation. I often find it kind of hard to believe at this point that the Foundation is still under human control.
Right, I've had to come up with a... No, go on.
Doug, I just keep seeing someone turn up on your end. Was that the demon ghost thing?
Yes, that would be the haunting I referred to earlier.
Oh. Okay, so that's biting
you. Possibly.
Look, I don't want to offend, but just to be safe, when was the last time you had your place checked for bedbugs?
Well, as I'm not sure how,
because those are a really nasty infestation. Those can be terrible. I've seen such horror stories.
I'm not sure how aware of the specific qualities of badgers you are, but we are rather fond of insects for sustenance.
Yes, I expect that applies mostly when you're awake and are consuming them, but those little bastards, I understand, are very good at waiting until you're asleep and could be leaving behind things that you might be perceiving as bite marks. Oh, by the way, greetings, Steam. Hitsugi.
Hello there. Yes. Well, you see, we badgers
And
have a very
yes.
specific tactic for dealing with such infestations, which is we take the bedding outside of the burrow and leave it in the sun to be bleached clean by the sun before bringing it back in. Look
Hmm.
it up. That is actual badger behavior.
Fair enough.
Now, I
Something you
found the
might want to
memory.
rule out. Just
Yeah,
thoroughly.
I will. I will look into it again just to be sure. Now, I've found the memory eel, and with a little bit of fiddling, because this is listed as level 5 classified. I've managed to find the object classification, which is apparently, if I'm pronouncing this correctly, thaumiel or thaumiel.
Ah, the SCP is considered godlike in power.
Uh, I'm not entirely sure if that is a classification in terms of the power of it or the friendliness or usefulness of it.
I'm not
Because it
sure either.
is.
I just know it sounds so incredibly melodramatic.
Mm,
Oh
mm.
no.
Well, the Foundation can be a tad melodramatic at times.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Again, I like to think that they've come a long ways. I don't think they're in the habit of arbitrarily sinking battleships these days, but
Well,
some things I still do wonder about.
I understand that Dr. Bright is still around, so I think
He's quite
at
hard to get rid of
least
now, as I understand it.
at least one SCP Foundation high up person is still of the old guard of insane people.
Indeed. In fact, I did well, we both must, to some degree, know Ansgar T. Odinson. And
Oh, yes.
I was mentioning earlier that not only is Bright still around, but apparently incredibly active, because over the course of a charity stream to raise attention for his raffles, I was at that for 5 hours going through SCP files up until someone suggested the list of things that Dr. Bright is not allowed to do at the Foundation. I wasn't expecting to burn hours on that. Unfortunately, it seems the list of things that Dr. Bright is not allowed to do at the Foundation has, at some point since last I checked, gone from 30 items to just shy of 300.
Yes, it has indeed extended dramatically over the last few years. The thing with, well, the thing I find troubling about Dr. Bright is, I think due to his current condition, he or she or they, depending on current incarnation, is somewhat unstable.
I'm not sure anything has changed, but yes, I do suspect that in some cases they might have been better off just taking Bright's backup and putting it in one of those boxes to leave on a shelf. Instead, if I'm not mistaken, I believe they've been in the process not too long ago of trying to replicate the damn thing for O5 use.
So I've heard. I don't think that is a particularly good idea, personally.
I am in total agreement.
You don't really need more Dr. Brights.
Indeed not. Assuming, of course, that the O5s are still human, which fingers crossed they are. Can't really tell, secrecy such as it is. But we've uncovered a lot of SCPs over many, many years since this became known. Just a metric crap ton of SCPs that have been shown to have infiltrated the Foundation without even trying. And there's no clear reason to believe it hasn't gotten to the top.
Well, the problem with an institution such as the SCP Foundation is that it is very difficult, due to the secrecy and clandestine nature of the institution itself. It's very difficult to actually go through and have a thorough cleaning out of any infiltrations, because there is little communication between the different levels outside of the proper and quite secretive channels. So if your only contact with the O5 Council is occasional notes left in SCP files, then there's really no way to actually confirm they are in fact still who they claim to be.
Indeed. Still, if the behavior of the Foundation overall has improved, if the O5s are no longer human, then we can at least hope that the change in management has been an overall upgrade.
Mm.
I mean,
if
humans were in charge of the battle days, clearly the bar was low.
Of course, the thing with the Foundation is, as it is spread across various different realities, the O5 Council is not necessarily the same in all of them. I believe the membership varies depending on which specific reality you are looking at them in.
And there are a wide variety.
Mm.
Have you ever found an explanation for why the Foundation hasn't purged Karsists from the face of the planet?
No, I don't believe I have, and I may need a reminder actually of what we're referring to.
Oh, the Karsists, right. The Karsists, and they are a group that I despise just about above all others, are basically blood mages, but with a particular lust for body horror type things. There's a very high chance that one of them is responsible for the flesh that hates. And generally they're responsible for all the really nasty demonic infestations of places that look like they could have come straight out of an H.P. Lovecraft novel. They worship diseases, cancers, tumors, and so on, and fancy themselves the fittest of the fittest, and generally exist.
They're a bit of a gimmicky group, are they?
They're full of crap group for the most part. Just a bunch of smug would-be overlords making deals with powers they couldn't possibly understand, more often than not. Just ruthless narcissists and deranged basket cases, with very few exceptions. Some of the most twisted people imaginable.
Indeed.
Now, hypothetically, there are good iterations, town shamans who use their blood only for the common good, but generally speaking, no.
Well, they are definitely a troubling group then, although I suppose the good examples of them could be a reason not to wipe out the group entirely, but I suppose at that point it's a balancing act between the positives and the negatives. But also, you have to question whether the Foundation is capable, and it depends how widely spread and powerful the group itself is.
That is a concern. After all, supposedly the Karsists have some members who are pretty high up. But I would think that this would make it a primary goal of the Foundation to bring them down. I do wish I had seen a bit more action on that point. Certainly, it does seem that certain cults trafficking in human flesh are thriving in the modern era.
Well,
more than they should be.
There do seem to be a great abundance of cults that are, related to and not related to various anomalous entities. Just one second while I look this up. That is not how you spell that. Let's try that. Is it that one? There's a particular anomalous entity that I'm just trying to find that is specifically known for spontaneously generating cult-like groups to follow it unwillingly, because the entity itself is consciously not fond of these groups, but can't seem to stop itself creating them.
I can't remember the number, but I think I'm familiar with this one.
I believe it's SCP 2662. Is a cognito-hazardous entity approximately 4 meters in height. Yeah, that's the one. It's essentially a 4 meter tall chap with tentacles on his back. It spontaneously generates cults. That's unfortunate for him, as they keep seeming to break into his containment chamber.
It's gotta be awkward every time. This is probably one of those individuals who's probably rather grateful for the Foundation's protection. Particularly if he doesn't want to try to rule them. I can sympathize quite acutely, actually. They have my sympathies. I have a #1 fan / stalker by the name of Andrew Fremen, who recently founded the Cult of Ark, and I do not approve.
Oh, dearie me.
I know it's not SCP related, he's just very weird. Jinx in the chat has certainly been exposed to it, and Steam, of course, has been actively encouraging it because they know I despise the very concept.
Well, that's what your fans are for, really, isn't it?
Well, mine, certainly. I seem to have gathered quite a few antagonists, frenemies, if you will. Most particularly Steam, who I do a monthly show with called Frenemies Forever. Well, it's aptly titled, I assure you.
There is indeed a chap in the chat. I'm not going to specify who just yet, though I'm sure I shall make himself known, who absolutely loves popping up whenever I mention one of my particular science fiction passions, which is Star Wars, to point out that the Klingons are space Argonians, even though the Klingons are not, in fact, in Star Wars.
Are we sure there aren't space Argonians, at least in the expanded universe? Not Klingons, clearly, but...
There are things that could be called space Argonians. In fact, I can specifically name some from the Star Wars Republic Commander novels, referred to, I think, as the Marits, although I'd have to look up the name. They are basically Argonians. Oh, and part of their culture is they are specifically cannibals.
Curious. That's... Well, they must reproduce quite rapidly if they can still sustain themselves in their own numbers.
Oh, they do. They their species is specifically quite well. They don't eat the living. They eat their deceased relatives in order to keep them as part of the whole, if you will.
Ah, okay. Actually, we have human corollaries, as I understand it.
Yeah, they do reproduce rather rapidly, and they hire themselves out to other groups as construction workers, amongst other things.
Don't worry, Ark, I'm lurching here too. I'm not following you, Mr. Gilmore, but I'll take your word for it.
Anyway, with the Foundation specifically, something that I've had rather an interest in is I like to know about some of the lesser known individuals who are relevant to but not part of the Foundation. So, groups and individuals of interest who are not contained by the Foundation I'm rather interested in, such as the Marshall, Carter, and Dark. But
Serpent's Hand?
Oh yes, there was one. Which is the group with the interdimensional library?
I believe that's... Well, The library, as I understand it, is self-managing, but it's the primary hideout of the Serpent's Hand that I'm
It is the
familiar
Serpent's
with.
Hand, I thought so, yeah. Yeah, I should clarify the group with access to the library rather than the group with the library. Yeah, they are something of. They are a group of interest to me, as well as to the Foundation. So I believe they're something of their mission statement is to do with rather than containing or neutralizing anomalous entities, is more towards the use of them.
I wouldn't be surprised, or probably liberation thereof. I suspect they probably have their own moral agenda on that point. What's always interested
Yes,
me more
indeed.
accurately is the chaos insurgency. Not that I want to speak in too much
Yes.
detail, because that's a really sore point with the Foundation in general, but I've always wondered whether or not they were a splinter that went rogue to their own benefit alone, or are they just the legacy of the people who saw the Foundation screwing the pooch badly in the battle days and decided they could do it better?
Yeah, that is a good question. Oh, just one moment.
Okay, I guess I'll catch up on...
Right, sorry about that. I had a slight interruption.
Nice.
So, what other topics shall we move on to in the little while we have left, if you do in fact have a little while left?
I do have a little while left, although I'll probably need to be dodging out maximum another 27 minutes.
Righto. What other things shall we discuss in that time?
Well, let's see. Troubling theories why the flesh that hates hasn't been scorched out of existence.
That could be an interesting topic, certainly.
Why do they think it's contained when they apparently still don't know how deep it goes?
That's a very good question. If you'll excuse me. Another question is why they haven't napalmed the entire site.
Indeed, and this is probably one of the cases where I look. Presumably, they haven't confirmed these things are immune to radiation or intense heat. And they use flamethrowers to dispatch of infected individuals. So firebombing, napalming, or if this is one of the times they should be considering use of the good old-fashioned nuke, this would seem to be pretty much ideal to that end.
Well, it is a matter of some concern why they would send in a small strike team armed with limited use flamethrowers, because they can only carry so much fuel for these flamethrowers. Why they would send in a small strike team into this massively infected area rather than flying over with a much greater amount of fuel and burning the entire place to the ground.
Oh yes, and I don't think they've nearly approached the limits of what they can do with remote exploration.
There's one...
So many things that they've been insisting upon using D-Class for when we have drones just commonly available.
Yes.
Capable of doing the same job
I could go and purchase one now myself.
And I'm pretty sure, in fact, I'd be willing to bet my last dollar or gold doubloon or whatever the hell have you, that the Foundation has access to some better tech still.
You would think so. You would certainly think so. That particular anomaly is one where I definitely agree with the words of Ripley from Aliens. Take off and nuke the entire site from orbit.
It's the only way to be sure, and even if you're not sure, it's worth a try, because whatever the flesh that hates is doing down there, it's doing with purpose, and that purpose can't possibly be good.
No, it cannot. Well, there's a little small topic for you. What would you say are similar threat level anomalies that should be dealt with decisively and definitively and permanently.
Pretty much everything Carsists are getting up to.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, that's kind of a short thread to pull to get all the big issue items right there. Then, of course, you have to, I would think it'd be important to clarify who's running the Foundation, so they should have someone looking into that, however discreetly.
There is, of course, if I'm looking at this correctly, SCP-2191, I think, is one that really should be dealt with. It's apparently some kind of parasitic organism that creates something resembling classic folklore vampires.
Oh yes, burn it. Burn it right now. I have never had any tolerance for vampires. In reality or fiction, the best things about them, I always thought, was that they are fictional, especially if these vampires are anything at all like those in popular medias. In fact, that's one of the things I remain grateful for Stephanie Meyer too, because I don't think anyone ever did more damage to the vampire mythos than the creator of Twilight.
I would agree with you there, although I don't mind stories about the vampires depending on the context. I do have contact with one who could be referred to by that title. Are you familiar with the Helsing mythology?
I assume you don't mean the anime series.
I do mean the anime series.
Oh, well, in that case, I'm a huge fan of Helsing Abridged.
Oh, yes. I do rather like the Helsing Abridged myself, and I am in contact with a chap who goes by the name used in Helsing Abridged, which is the Crimson Fucker.
Yes. It's a character well worth emulating. That iteration of Alucard is the best, without a doubt.
Oh, I found the thing I was looking for, which is SCP-2191, a note from the O5 Council. It's the thing that resembles the vampires, although it's its own thing. The O5 Council says, or this particular O5 Council member says, there are some who wish to believe that the Foundation has never nor will ever cater to the designs and desires of an anomalous entity. Foundation efforts to contain SCP-2191 are now thought to have inadvertently led to the deaths of approximately 40,000 people over 45 years. The obvious choice would be to neutralize the threat, and we've tried. The number of civilian and Foundation casualties being well beyond acceptable numbers. In order to contain the larger threat, we must allow it to feed. We are aware of the offense caused by this procedure. This is not the first time, nor will it be the last, that the Foundation has been forced to commit a lesser evil in prevention of a greater. We do believe, in the end, our current method is the most preferable with regards to both ethics and efficiency. We are fully aware that every sacrifice feeds SCP-2191-3, allowing it and its brood to thrive, but we are not about to sacrifice the entire Balkan Peninsula to neutralize that threat. Not yet.
Yes, I've seen this in other cases like it, where they've decided that the lesser evil is more acceptable. That chafes, because it implies that they've stopped looking or given up. And if that's the case, then they're absolutely dropping the ball. They can never stop looking for a way to purge the threat entirely. If they do, if they're not refining the techniques any further, then that doesn't bode well for humanity as a whole. It's not sustainable. They can't keep doing it, even with amnestics in that one case.
Especially if the anomaly continues to spread.
Absolutely. This is not an acceptable lesser evil by any rational standard. Even if they did have to sacrifice the entire Balkan Peninsula, that is preferable to eventually having to lose the world to whatever it may be in context.
Mm.
And there are some catastrophes that, while they might be incredibly damaging, may be necessary just to bring an end to it.
Yeah, and the loss of a peninsula is definitely preferable to the loss of all peninsulas and anything connected to them.
What I would like to see is more experimentation with pitting SCPs against each other, especially ones that they're not content to just purge outright like this. If they can get these things ripping into each other, that might help solve their problems.
It could, and I think if I remember some articles that I have read correctly, they have had some success with that in some limited tests. However, in the same way as with nature conservation, it's very difficult to tell what the introduction of a new species will have until you introduce it, because it's very difficult to predict how different things will interact with each other once they are actually put together. I think the same thing could be true of SCPs. You may find that a apparently very dangerous entity could react in a very unexpected way with another dangerous entity, potentially
that's definitely a
making...
possibility, but this is why these things need to be researched. I'm not inclined to argue for rushing into things, but
No,
I would hope that these are priorities for the Foundation.
yeah, you don't want to have two things that are bad and combine them and make something far worse.
Seek and Terrasque launching into sun, coming back down with the fury of the sun. Because it simply cannot be allowed to die.
Perhaps some kind of space containment that's not in the sun might be appropriate there.
It's a good question. How good is it swimming through space?
Well, as I understand it, it is currently a lizard, so not very good, as it has nothing to push against. However, I'm sure it would find some miraculous way to adapt were it to be placed in space.
And, I understand the Foundation does have access to space travel. Maybe it's worth firing it at the nearest black hole. But we'll see. I suspect if it comes back somehow from a black hole, we're not significantly worse off than we were previous. I don't see how it could possibly come back with the powers of a black hole. You just have a moving black hole.
Although you could even contain it in space with the same containment procedures it currently has, an acid bath in space.
Why not?
And then
the more layers, the better.
Yeah, then if it breaks the first layer of containment, it's in space. So you'll at least have a significant delay before it can do anything else. Wouldn't it end up spaghettified, says Mark Caesar? Well, that actually could be possible, as I believe things do tend to stretch and contort as they enter the event horizon of a black hole. So you could end up with an indestructible spaghetti lizard coming back to Earth.
If it, again, somehow manages to come back at all. But see, here's the thing that's always puzzled me about the Terrasque. If it's that unstoppable, that immortal, that impervious to all physics, then the acid should have stopped working some time ago, and it would have gained the powers of acid. So clearly some things do work. Maybe everything up to an actual killing, and strictly speaking, if you're throwing it into a black hole, well, time itself gets wonky, so would it ever die anyway?
I don't know. And I don't think anyone, in fact, knows that for certain. And if you were to test it with the entity in question, I don't think it would be willing to tell you if it did survive.
No, and strictly speaking, the entire idea in that case is that if you fire into a black hole, you never want to hear from it again.
No, that is the preferable option, is for it to go and stay gone.
My fervent hope is that this, in other cases, are priorities for the Foundation to study, to come up with solutions that are lasting, because they can't just keep collecting these things and appeasing them, or in this case, expect to never run out of acid. Look, Tesquay is actually a pretty low threat overall. I just chafe at the idea it can't be done away with.
As long as it's contained, it's a relatively low threat. It just seems to keep breaching its containment, although it seems to be, when it does, fairly rapidly recontained again.
Yes, they never really go into detail how they pull that off. But I think we were quite agreed, at the very least, they could do some refining of the containment procedures there.
Perhaps have an extra layer of containment around it.
And Steam, you can fire from and into a black hole if you can pull it off. I'm sure they've got some fancy mathematical explanation why that won't actually work, though.
It's similar to the number of which I can't remember currently, which is referred to as the shy guy.
No, that's an easy solve. Just leave him alone.
Yeah, just stop taking pictures of the shy guy. Leave the shy guy alone.
Some of these are far easier than they're presented as being.
Just leave them in there. Get rid of all the pictures, and there you go.
Yep.
Chappie is contained. Problem is that, well, the problem with that containment procedure is it's not known how many pictures or representations of the entity are currently out in the world.
Well, every time he breaks containment, he'll be bled directly to one of them. I can't imagine that'll happen too many times before it's dealt with, although all it takes is one digital image to get on the internet, and I suppose they're really in trouble. So let's hope that whoever does recklessly have a picture of Shy Guy doesn't upload it anytime soon.
Especially not to some meme site where it'll be spread around like the ultimate memetic hazard.
Yeah, Shy Guy is going to be busy for the next several decades, if that happens.
Well, I think we've had a fairly successful chat there for after the initial difficulties. Shall we wrap it up there for now?
I think that might be wise, yes.
Excellent. Right. Well, thank you very much for coming, everyone, and thank you for joining me, Director Arketer.
Oh, it's been a pleasure.
I'm sure.
Again, apologies for the delays in voice and video. I was hoping to get back from the alternate history entities facility before this point, and it just didn't pan out. So that's the cause of any delays.
Of course, yes. Well, things happen unexpectedly and cause delays that just can't be advanced. So you just have to sometimes run with what you are left with.
As I mentioned in the charity Twitter group, I expect everything to go wrong, so I can be pleasantly surprised when they don't.
Oh yes.
And, when they do, I can be smugly content in my rightness.
Yes. Oh look, it went wrong just as I said it would. Or, oh look, it went right. That's definitely an improvement on what I was expecting.
It's great news.
Well, thank you very much for coming, everyone, and I do hope you'd be willing to join me for another chat at some point.
Quite possibly. And furthermore, I was asking you, did you have that time on Saturday free? I could have you a guest on my show, which runs every Saturday at 4 p.m. CST.
I will need to check some things, but I will get back to you on that one.
Very well. If you can let me know as soon as tomorrow, I generally try to have a souvenir prepared, and I'll have to rush on that point. But if you can, also let me know. We can always do it some other Saturday. Meanwhile,
I shall wrap this up. Thanks for coming, everyone, and good night.